Here's a question. What if Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn had survived his encounter with Sith Lord Darth Maul? How would the fate of the galaxy, and more importantly young Anakin Skywalker, have been altered? We join the story during the climactic lightsaber battle on Naboo. Darth Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn were battling it out, going toe-to-toe around a seemingly endless cavern, as Obi-Wan Kenobi watched on from behind a laser wall that he was impatiently waiting to deactivate. Qui-Gon parried his green lightsaber off a flurry of attacks from Darth Maul and stepped back, staring down his devil-like opponent with disgust. Maul only snarled back before stepping forward again and lunging one side of his lightsaber toward Qui-Gon's head. Qui-Gon batted it away, at which point Maul tried to slam the hilt of his lightsaber into the elderly Jedi Master's face, hoping to stun him before running him through with the laser sword. But Qui-Gon was ready. He arched backward, watching the lightsaber hilt as it harmlessly passed inches above his face, at which point the laser wall containing Kenobi opened and the apprentice once again joined the fight. Unable to fight the two Jedi in such a cramped space, Maul was soon on the back foot. Qui-Gon force-pushed the Zabrak backward into Kenobi's outstretched lightsaber, and the stunned Sith dropped his own weapon, stumbling sideways and falling down the chasm, the top half of his body separating from his lower half. Victorious, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan took a moment to catch their breaths, before heading back to the palace hangar to collect Anakin, who Qui-Gon still hoped was hiding, and then locate Queen Amidala. The Jedi would need to make a report to the High Jedi Council, but that would have to wait, as the battle to liberate Naboo was still raging. But when the two Jedi arrived back at the hangar, they were shocked to see that not only had the droids stationed in the hangar now stand limp and lifeless, but Anakin was gone. Qui-Gon reached out his feelings and sensed Skywalker, and how he was filled with happy and victorious emotions. Confused for a moment, things quickly became clear when the surviving Naboo starfighters arrived back in the hangar, one of which was being piloted by the young boy. Qui-Gon and Kenobi smiled at each other. They knew there was something special about the boy, and now he had proven himself by destroying the droid control ship and helping win the Battle of Naboo. The Gunkins had been victorious on the plains, and the Queen had captured Viceroy Newt Gunray and had already sent for a ship from Coruscant to come and collect the prisoner and take him for trial. The two Jedi said that they would accompany the Viceroy back to the capital alongside young Anakin Skywalker. The three of them bid farewell to Queen Amidala, with the young monarch taking her time to say goodbye to Anakin, promising that they would see each other again. After all, she would soon be retiring as queen and going into politics as a senator, so she would regularly be on Coruscant in the Senate, only a stone's throw from the Jedi Temple. This cheered the young boy up a little, and they set off back to Coruscant in the Jedi Temple to make their report. Arriving at the temple, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan discussed their encounter at length with the Council. There could be no doubt that the Sith were back, but alongside this, Qui-Gon also reaffirmed his choice to train Anakin as his own apprentice. While this might have gotten the Elder Master ejected from the Order, the Council decided to allow it for two reasons. Firstly, they deeply respected Qui-Gon, and after defeating a Sith apprentice, they were kind of in his debt. And secondly, they sensed that Anakin really was the chosen one, and if he was to be trained at all, then it was better that he and Qui-Gon were still under the watchful eye of the Council. As the years passed, Qui-Gon's survival would not change much about the lead-up to the Clone Wars, save for Darth Sidious having to use a different approach to getting Count Dooku to join him. Still, rather than Obi-Wan being the one who trained Anakin, Qui-Gon would have taken over the role of Skywalker's master. Now, this is where things would have drastically changed for Anakin. Obi-Wan was a model Jedi, and one that followed the rules to a T, exemplifying everything it was to be a Jedi. But for Anakin, Obi-Wan was too strict and his methods too rigid for someone like Anakin, who had come to the Jedi Order relatively late on in his life. But Qui-Gon would have allowed Anakin more flexibility to express himself and try out new things. Being acutely aware that the Jedi and their ways weren't always necessarily correct, Qui-Gon would teach Anakin to see the Jedi Code as more of a guideline than a strict set of rules to stick to. Yes, the Council would constantly worry and fret that this lack of discipline would lead Anakin to explore his darker side, something that they were worried about from the very beginning. But the truth is, it had the opposite effect. Anakin embraced Qui-Gon's teachings and flourished under the tutoring of a more maverick master. Palpatine would have tried to sink his claws into Anakin, but young Skywalker, having a lot of freedom under his master, was far less swayed by the Chancellor. The two were friends and confidants of sorts, but no matter how hard Palpatine tried, Anakin was not swayed by his manipulations. In fact, Qui-Gon, who was skeptical of Palpatine from the start, made sure that the Chancellor never got into Anakin's head. It was this that saved Skywalker from ultimately falling to the dark side and joining Palpatine. Qui-Gon's supportive role and understanding of Anakin's wants, needs, and desires also meant that when the young boy fell in love with Padme, the aging Jedi supported them, and even promised to keep the relationship quiet. He would give them advice and space to be a normal couple, and while Qui-Gon made it clear that it couldn't get in the way of his training, he afforded Anakin the ability to form a loving relationship that he could be proud of, one that could not be used against him by either the Jedi or the Sith. At some point, only a few years before the outbreak of the Clone Wars, Qui-Gon's former master Count Dooku approached him and offered him a place at his side, leading the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Like Qui-Gon, Dooku had been a bit of a maverick in his time, and was often at odds with the Jedi Council, something that he had obviously passed on to his student. Dooku pleaded with Qui-Gon, telling him that the Republic was corrupt, and the Jedi were becoming more and more arrogant and self-absorbed. Qui-Gon couldn't deny his old master was right, and if he was being truthful, Qui-Gon had thought the very same thing. But despite having less rigid morals than the Jedi, he was still ultimately just that, a Jedi. He could sense his old master had gone down a path that he could not follow, so Qui-Gon politely turned down Dooku's request, although he did tell him that while he would not join him, he would not stop Dooku from doing what his heart and conscience told him. Qui-Gon kept this meeting with his former master quiet even years later during the Clone Wars themselves. While he wasn't supportive of Dooku becoming a Sith apprentice, he understood his motivations. When it came to battles, Qui-Gon actively chose to not take part or become a general. He didn't believe that the galaxy should be fighting at all. Of course, with Jedi in short supply and needed on battlefields around the galaxy, Anakin was prematurely knighted and deployed to far-flung planets to help lead the clone army. Qui-Gon didn't stop his apprentice, and he felt a great deal of relief knowing that his other apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi, was often by Skywalker's side. He had taught both of them well, and he trusted them to make their own minds up about things. Anakin ended up taking on an apprentice of his own, Ahsoka Tano. Qui-Gon and Ahsoka got along like a house on fire, and he thought that she was the perfect apprentice for Skywalker. She was strong-willed, cocky, and wasn't 100% set on following every single rule of the Jedi Council, just like Anakin, Qui-Gon, and Dooku before her. As the war dragged on though, and the bodies continued piling up, Qui-Gon's thoughts turned to Dooku. He was the clear leader of the Separatist Alliance. And Qui-Gon knew that if the Jedi could get through to his former master, the war could be ended. He took the idea to the Council, who outright rejected it, saying they would not bargain with Dooku or come to any kind of arrangements. Disgusted at the Council and their lack of motivation to find peace, Qui-Gon made a massive decision. He would walk away from the Order. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka all tried to talk him out of it, but his mind was set. He walked away, determined to forge his own path in life. He had nothing left to offer the Order, and they had nothing to offer him. He immediately reached out to Dooku, who was sure his apprentice wanted to join him as head of the CIS. Of course, when the two met up, Qui-Gon explained all his misgivings about the Jedi, and, much to his surprise, Dooku expressed the same misgivings about the Sith. The two of them had a heart-to-heart, and while Dooku had committed atrocious acts as a Sith apprentice, he found that they went back to the way things were when he and Qui-Gon were master and apprentice. Dooku made the decision that he, like Qui-Gon, was going to walk away from his order and meet his apprentice in the middle. They would neither be Jedi nor Sith. They would just be Force users, fighting for peace and balance. Ultimately, Qui-Gon and Dooku knew that they had to make a move against Palpatine. While no one knew Palpatine's true identity, Dooku revealed the truth to Qui-Gon. The war showed no sign of ending, and every day more and more Jedi, clones, and civilians were dying, so they made a plan to ambush Palpatine and take him down. But they both knew they could not do it alone. The Jedi Council would never have agreed to such a bold and risky move, but Qui-Gon knew of two people who would, Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano. The four of them came up with a plan and put it into action. They waited until Palpatine was leaving the Senate, building on a completely routine and unassuming journey back to his own living quarters. Palpatine's crimson lightsaber flashed to life as Qui-Gon launched from the shadows, swooping his own green blade towards the elderly Sith Lord. Anakin was quick to follow, running in from the opposite side of the hangar with his blue lightsaber ready. Dooku and Ahsoka took down the several guards that were readying themselves to protect the Chancellor, and Palpatine looked around, a wide grin on his face. He was surrounded, but he was not willing to go down without a fight. Lightning burst from his fingertips and blasted Anakin across the room, while Dooku blocked several bots with his lightsaber. Qui-Gon and Ahsoka went both high and low with their lightsabers, yet Palpatine spun sideways, avoiding the blur of blades. The intense battle raged on, with more and more guards flooding into the hangar. Ahsoka and Anakin took it in turns to keep the red-robed guards at bay, before something astonishing happened. A massive explosion rang out through the hangar, sending everyone there flying. There were flames and chaos, but when the panic had subsided, it was clear what had happened. Qui-Gon had allowed himself to be pushed backward while dueling Palpatine. Pressed up against the engines of a shuttle, he gave Dooku a prearranged signal, and the elderly man sent lightning bolts of his own from his fingertips directly into the engines of the fully fueled shuttle. The last thing Qui-Gon saw was the look of sadness and regret on the face of his old master. The shuttle erupted into a ball of flames, instantly killing both Qui-Gon and Sidious. The Sith Lord had never seen it coming, and he never assumed that a Jedi would sacrifice themselves in such a way. But of course, Qui-Gon was no ordinary Jedi. In fact, if you remember, he was not a Jedi at all. He had learned how to free his mind through Dooku, and it was something that he passed on to Anakin, and he had passed on to Ahsoka. He was no Jedi. He was no Sith. He was a conduit of the Force, and one that had just nobly helped take down the most powerful Sith in history. In the days following the incident, the galaxy would find out about Palpatine and how he was playing both sides of the war. They would also learn of Qui-Gon's heroism through Dooku, Anakin, and Ahsoka, and he would be posthumously hailed as one of the great heroes of the Clone Wars. A repentant Dooku would end up in the Citadel, a prison designed specifically for Jedi, while Anakin would follow in the footsteps of both his master and his apprentice, leaving the Order to live out the rest of his life in peace with Padme and eventually his two children, Luke and Leia. And while he would never again return to the life of being a Jedi, Anakin would never forget the teachings and the sacrifice of Master Qui-Gon Jinn. So now it's over to you. How do you think Qui-Gon's survival would have shaped the fate of the galaxy? We love to hear from you, so make sure you leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. If you haven't already, please give this video a like and a subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.